Um, Thank you very much, Matt, for recording this and for helping with setting up the meeting. So, hi everyone. Let's start by introducing any new people that have joined today, if they have joined, if we have new people actually. No. Do we have new people joining for the first time?
Not that I see as of yet.
Me neither. Okay, so we're still in the family. All right. So I didn't get any specific topics from for today's meeting, but I'd like to ask if there's any notable updates that happened in the past 2 weeks that anybody wants to speak up about.
I could just talk about Coop for a minute.
Wonderful.
Okay. So I guess there's on the Coop side, there's been a bunch of PRs that came in. We merged in last week. So I did some work on specifying network policies to protect the control plane from invoker containers. I put in some changes about using pod affinity and anti-affinity to do scheduling correctly, get the pods in the right places on the nodes. There's some configuration cleanups, and so the runtimes are now configurable by using a runtime.json file, so you can figure out which runtimes you want to deploy just by changing that. We had a contribution from Daisy for the Kafka packaging. So the Kafka that just got merged a few minutes ago. So using the Kafka package installer now works. And there's a pending PR for persistence that hopefully I can get one of the guys, Ben or someone else, to look at who knows Kube relatively well. And that lets you survive pods being restarted. So it puts persistence for CouchDB and Kafka and Zookeeper and and Redis, so that if pods get restarted, you don't lose your state. And we're down to I think 5 open issues at this point. So things are in pretty good shape.
Wow, this is amazing news. On the network segmentation that you mentioned about, are you referring to the network policies that are attached to the running action containers, so that they cannot, like nobody that runs the action can poke back into the Kube cluster or controller?
So what's done now is that there are network policies that the OpenWhisk pods, like the controller pod, the Kafka pod, the CouchDB pod, won't accept connections directly from user containers. So that there's a whitelist of which pods are allowed to talk to which other pods on the control plane.
And on we have the same question for Mesos, and that's why I'm asking. So on protecting the Kube API from action containers that want to actually go straight into the Kube API, is that also handled?
That's not done yet. Probably the way to do that is to use Calico to configure something on the worker nodes, to configure the IP table on the worker nodes, that basically lock out the user containers.
Yeah.
At least on the default strategy where we use Docker on the worker node to launch the containers, we'll have to do something that's not a Kubernetes thing. With the container factory, I think Ben and Red Hat is pursuing, those are proper kube pobs, so you could use the Kubernetes network policies for those if they wanted to. Okay. And for all this stuff, feedback is, anyone have any concerns or comments about this, just raise them. It'd be great to get other people looking at this.
Thank you, Dan. This is very interesting. We're also looking, as I said, in the Mesos to protect the action containers from poking back into the Mesos, and we also ended up going with the IP tables route. Unfortunately, this is not something that we could potentially share with the community because it has to do with the way that each company deploys this. So that's why I asked, maybe in Kubernetes there is a more generic way to do this that can also be shared somehow as with the I don't know, packages.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll have to see how it ends up looking. Hopefully we'll be able to share it. And Calico is open, so that may be more general.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Are there other notable updates or any other topics you guys want to talk about?
I'll just talk about release, the release process. So Vincent's on the call, so I know he's been doing the work, and I've yet to have status with him this week. But Vincent, feel free to chime in. So Vincent's been exploring both Travis and Jenkins for a week through the incubator release repo to kick off the automated releases. You'll start seeing that fill out. He figured out a way how to extend the duration of Travis so he can accommodate for all the initial repos their builds, their build times. And one thing I wanted to mention, and why I was speaking up initially, was because of we're going to be moving towards automation. So Daisy, who was aforementioned as having contributed to the Cube project in form of Kafka installation and Kafka package, she's going to start working on looking at Apache Creator, which are 3 projects: Apache Rat, Apache Tentacles, and Apache Whisker. So she's starting to work as of last night, her morning. She's going to start looking about how to enable that for our Whisk deploy project. And once she's satisfied, we're going to do a review and post it to the dev list and let people review what she's done and see if we can roll that out to the other repos, automate those 3 aspects. And in addition, we're also doing an exploration. My team, after the release management stuff is done, we're going to start looking at creating a web front-end UI. I know that we've talked to some people who in Samsung, I believe, who've created their own UI, and we've been talking about them contributing it back to the community. They haven't done so, but we wanted to look at doing our own web client UI as well. So my team might start looking at doing that as well. So that's about it. Oh, the last thing is cron job. So if you recall, sometime last December, there was a period where we figured out that our Docker images were not getting somehow pushed to Docker Hub. And so we were surprised 2 weeks after the fact when suddenly they were pushed that our Whisk deploy was broken. So what we've done is, I'd encourage other projects to do that. Maybe we want to do this as a consensus, but at least for the repos that we tend to build, we tend to put on nightly cron builds, which is a new feature in Travis. So if no one objects, as part of the release management stuff, we'd like to turn that on. So we know at the earliest when we wake up in the morning that something's broken and it needs to be fixed. So that's all.
So this is the nightly cron job is more for running the tests?
Yeah, it'll run all that automated tests. Yeah, it'll do a build, just like you would do on a PR build or a master build or a tag release build. It's do a nightly build and you'll get a notice. Yeah, whoever's the owner will get a notice.
Got it. So Matt, I think the question that I would have here is what would change the state if we don't push anything into master, but after a successful build, then what could it happen that the master state would change into an unhealthy build?
Well, actually, we found out things like where things in Travis changes, where they changed the VM or whatever. So we have to address that. Since we turned it on, we found a couple things where we felt the pain that Travis was down or Travis changed, and we had to pin ourselves to a certain version of a VM. So,
good one. Yeah. Thank you, Matt. So I say, are there other updates or topics that you want to address during this call?
Hello. Hello?
Hello, we hear somebody speaking up. Who's that?
Oh, it's Carlos.
Hey, Carlos.
Carlos.
Couldn't see you're in the dark.
Not a problem. Yeah. Do we have an agenda? I didn't check the mailing list last night.
So no specific topic, Carlos, for this week. That's why I'm asking if we're free to talk right now for ideas or topics.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about what we're working on.
Carl, go ahead.
Oh, for us, I think I joined late. We haven't discussed it yet.
So far we touched about we got an update from Dave on the Kubernetes updates, and then Matt updated us on the release process and the nightly cron jobs.
For me, I would just going through the runtimes. So working right now with Swift 4. It looks like Apple is going to do Swift 4.1. They're not binary compatible. So I'm in the pickle there. If go put what I have right now or maybe make an experiment or something like that, or make people aware. And then 4.1 will be the one I think we want to fully support, or those type of things. And then yeah, that's where I'll be spending some time. And also I look into the Alpine, moving to Alpine. I know Adobe has their own fork, and that's kind of sucky to have your own fork. And I want everybody to use master. I'll work out of that. So I did some testing, and it looks good. Gorkin, I don't know. Gorkin joined. He's new to the team from Red Hat. I know him from PhoneGap. I think yesterday we were discussing. He did a Java local development, so it looks very promising. I tried, very good. He showed me a demo on how to do debugging locally using VS Code, not Eclipse, not IntelliJ, VS Code, which is very cool. I like VS Code. So he showed how to do debugging of a Java action. So I think Java needs a little bit of more love than JavaScript. Most people use JavaScript based on the stats, but I think it's cool that we put love on all languages and get more people trying serverless. So his PR looks good. It's in the dev tools. People can give it a try. Was a minor bug. If you don't pass the parameters, it should start that in. But other than that, it looks good. And he has some integration into VS Code. So I was just going to ask him if we can do a video or a presentation, maybe next interchange. I think that's it. Last thing we're looking into is logs. I don't know if somebody from the Germany team, IBM, wants to look about logs and the logs SPIs that we did in the Invoker and the Invoker changes. But other than that, I don't have anything else.
Yeah, I can briefly update on that. With Tyson's logs SPI, we use that to implement our IBM-based Cloud Functions log analysis service and forward everything there. That stuff is coming. It didn't hit production yet, but it played out pretty nicely using SPIs to implement different functionality. So that worked pretty well. I guess everybody who's using the Bluemix thing or the IBM Cloud thing, will be noticed once it's out. So that's the new SPIs I added end of last year.
Thanks, Marcus. Will this be pushed back into the open source, or is just an adapter which is made specifically for the Bluemix?
Right, it's out in the open. It's actually it's a log driver that writes a log file locally to disk, and then we have a forwarder in the backend, which is IBM specific. But you can build anything on the SPI that's on master right now.
Yeah, I think I brought up like doing it has potential to do a blog post or explain to someone like how can you take this file and then use Logstash and put in your elk type of example, right? I think Dragos, you guys were looking at remind me a different target,
Fluentd,
right?
with Fluentd.
Yeah, so you guys can do the same until we figure out a good way to put this in a repo or something. We can do it with docs, showing like if you want to give it a try, this is how you can like consume it and then send it to the target. Yeah, but ours is based on Log4Water and elk technology.
Yeah, I think Adobe's implementation is on the way. That's a Splunk log store. I looked at the PR today. I don't know what is Tyson on the call?
I think it's not, but you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, you are?
I'm actually going to be pushing that the rest of the way through. Marcus, I've already made some changes based upon your comments on the PR. I just haven't pushed it back yet. The only thing I'm looking at now is how some of the configuration parameters work. So I'm thinking that it's a little confusing at least to get it set up. It was for me. So I'm just wondering if maybe there's some things we can do around the config, specifically with the Splunk one that Tyson pushed. So that's really localized almost all the Splunk implementation itself. It doesn't have anything to do with the SPI.
Okay. Yeah, regarding config, there's there's a little bit of confusion right now because we are in the middle of transition of our old Whisk config manually built config thing, and community supported pure conf. So that might cause some confusion.
Yeah,
but
I had a couple conversations with Tyson that I think might have precipitated the email that he sent, because I was like, wait a minute, how does this work? How does that work? Explain this all to me. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. If you need any help, feel free to reach out.
Sure. Yeah, I made sense of it once somebody explained to me what was happening and why.
Yeah, speaking of the config, I was also wondering, seeing Rodrigue's email, I think yesterday, whether the intent is to actually do a cutover and change all the configurations, or slowly change the configuration over time up to a point in time where we realized Whisk properties or the Whisk configuration is not needed, and then we just take that class out.
Yeah, it's a bit hard because there's a lot of stuff in Whisk config, and it's a lot of different bits and pieces that you need to change to do the change properly. Sometimes it's just replacing one call with the other, but sometimes it's actually change the interface to be something different, so everything is better than before. So I'd advocate for doing it incrementally like we did now. There was a discussion on how we can make the cutover more gracefully. And I actually had a reply to that thread, but my email client didn't want to send a non-HTML email, so it didn't reach Apache. I tried to resend it using my Mac client later. I think there's something pretty easy that we can do there to make it graceful, at least for now. But yeah, in terms of cutover, I don't think we shouldn't open one PR and rip it all out and exchange it, because that will be a lot of stuff and a lot of changed files and very hard to review and very hard to keep non-conflicting. It will be very, very, very frustrating. So let's do it incrementally.
I was just wondering, as someone that's really new to all this and doesn't really know some of the history, and really doesn't know much about how pure config works either, just sort of reviewing it yesterday. Seems like the config is much more modularized, where you can kind of just define a little chunk of properties that you want and then just force the config to parse again. But it seems like the Whisk one is very like centralized and a little bit more hierarchical. Is that how we want it to work, where every little section kind of will parse its config and try and bind it to an object, or should it be somewhat more centralized as it is today? I was just wondering what the general consensus is so far.
It's for me, I'd say it's the former, and the bits implemented in pure config right now are actually adhering to that, what you said with modularity. I advocate to scope everything under Whisk dot, but from then on, the database client can read just the database bit and just like you said. So that's where we're heading.
Okay, great. That's what I started to do for the Splunk SPI configs, is to try and align it that way. So hopefully that will make sense when I push that PR. Great, thank you.
Yep.
It just made me think that, I think I mentioned it the other day that to someone that it would be good to have a config.md. We have a lot of variables, and we don't have a sentence for each one of what they're supposed to do, their own code. So I don't know what's a good balance of things are changing versus trying to dock, and then the dock becomes stale. most of the stuff is in Ansible, but lately with pure-config, I started to see stuff loaded through application/application. I don't know, something to think about. A good way of extracting the documentation or finding out what are these variable names and what they do. Maybe we do it in code and extract it into a markdown file or something like that. Just
it'd be
to
nice
make it painless to not maintain two things.
It'd be nice if pure-config could somehow do that, because you can get pure-config to dump a current configuration that you have loaded, which would then give you everything that's currently active, but not everything that's possible. And there's no commentary on it. It's just a slug of JavaScript. It's such a slug of JSON or HCon, whatever that looks like JSON stuff is. You can get it to dump it, but that's the best you can do.
Yeah, doesn't offer something like an annotation or a description for each one?
I can't find anything. I was looking for just this yesterday because I was like, how is this modularized? Are we going to know where the configs are and what they mean?
Yeah.
And it's something we can obviously work with them on.
Yeah, continuing this line of thought, I'm not sure if it happened to you, but when I sometimes when I configure the invoker or the controller with environment variables, sometimes I wonder whether that environment variable applies only to the invoker or only to the controller, if it's used only in one place or the other. And on this line of thought, I was wondering if different configuration, like even for pure config configurations, we could maintain separate configuration, one for invoker, one for controller, and then load what's common for both, but call them out specifically. This is common, that's specific.
I think we do just that. And to Carlos's point, I think if we will have one common application conf, one in the invoker and one in the controller eventually, I guess at least. And from then on, maybe we can just build our own, a small parser which just looks through the comments and says, okay, the next line by convention is the
description
that I just documented, and then generate an MD out of that just for a start. I mean, that should be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, or even if it lives in the .conf, it's okay. We can point people to the line number that has the value in the sentence.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I see it more and more because I started doing Docker Compose and playing with Kubernetes, and yeah, this it gets tricky to know which are the configurations that you need to put and where are the defaults, and everything has defaults, or maybe.
Oh yeah, that's actually the main reason for the change. I created somewhere a documentation on how to move to pure config. Somewhere in the repository there is something about that, and the main reason for that was that today, or at least partly, we hold all the or we did held all the defaults in Ansible configuration.
Ansible, yep.
Cube and everything always broke, and eventually with pure config, all the defaults will be in application conf, and that's where the parameter passing comes in, where we in Ansible we just pass maybe that variable exists, or if it doesn't exist, just pass nothing and take the default from application conf. The defaults will live with the components, and I think that's how it should be. And then my main goal was that a controller and invoker and everything will be startable, at least for trying out, with a very minimal set of variables. Just tell me where the database is, tell me where Kafka is, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, and this has been working. I think we've added half a dozen new variables in the last week, and I haven't had to touch Kube at all. So anything added in pure config with the proper default, it just works. So it's great. The faster we move stuff there, the better.
All right. Thank you for the update. Are there any other topics for discussions?
Hey, Jarvis, I posted something in the chat. So over at IBM, we're kind of figuring out our meetups and conferences for the year. Just curious if any other folks outside IBM have some interesting meetups or conference talks planned, or they've got anything they're aware of that they want to submit for that maybe we want to participate in too.
I think we can, if nobody has heard this, Daniel, I think we can ask, or we have a Slack chat group for this, right? We have a Slack channel for this.
Yep. Yeah. So if you're aware, we can join Slack. It's I think like events, meetups, and something else. Yeah, just good to see what the community's doing. We're doing any interesting talks.
All right. Any more thoughts?
So we need to pick somebody for the next.
I was looking through the commit history. I don't know if it was mentioned or not, but there's a new views. I think are for certain things. I think Roderick worked on that. So if you have a deployment, I mentioned it in the mailing list, but just to reiterate, or if somebody has questions, you can deploy these views ahead of time if you're rolling over a different driver. But you can deploy these views, which is now they have their own versions, and it would make the database perform better, and he removed a lot of craft by doing that refactoring. So I think now the version is 2.1.0. So it depends how large your database is the amount of time that it takes to re-index that view, and then you can roll over to using it. That's the only thing I saw in the last 2 weeks that we haven't discussed. The other stuff was JMX, but other than that, and pure config, nothing major happening.
Something to mention probably from the Adobe side is that we still continue to work on our Mesos deployment, and we're still looking. We have a challenge that some of our deployment artifacts would only apply to the topology that we spin up here, and that might not apply to the open source. And we're still looking for ways to make it easy to maintain both on the open source DCOS package in Mesos world. That would also work smoothly with our internal deployment, and we're still working our ways through that. It was more, I think it took more time than we initially thought, just because we have a ton of security controls that we have to apply and network segmentation, and there's more work that we initially anticipated. But hey, after all, we're making infrastructure easy for developers, so I guess somebody needs to take this pain. So yes, we're happily taking this pain, but just it just takes a little longer than we thought to just share these packages with the community, unfortunately.
The package living under your Adobe org, or you have a different org?
Most probably they're going to dwell where the other packages for Mesos/Mesosphere are going to dwell.
Okay.
All right. So let's see if there is any more topics, or we can take some time back this call.
You need to help elect a new host for the 2 weeks from today, the 31st. You have to get somebody to volunteer for the next moderator.
Thanks, Matt. Yes. So let's see if there's not any. If we don't have any more topics, we can see who's willing to moderate our next call. Okay. So assuming we don't have Any volunteer for next? Well, Matt, you said it's on the 31st.
Yeah, it's the 31st.
All right. Do you want to take this on the email? I'm happy to volunteer twice unless there's no volunteers.
I'd like to have somebody at least pencil themselves in because I don't know if we'll be able to chase down the mailing list. I mean, any of the regulars and the committers want to do it. I mean, we're going to be cycling through people, so I did last week. So I don't know if Carlos, Jeremiah, Marcus, anybody wants to step up. Anybody who's a regular and feels comfortable can step up. I'll facilitate as I usually do.
Yeah, I can drive the next one.
Thanks, Carlos. And if anybody wants to displace Carlos, I'm sure he'll be happy to pick another volunteer from the mailing list.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. Okay, then let's take the time back, assuming there's no more topics. We can always use the mailing list to bring up more topics. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. And I hope you have a productive 2 weeks until we meet again.